I didn't realize until much later that the man sitting in the hotel lobby that night had never actually been a guest. At the time, he looked like any other tired traveler passing through. Someone checking in late after a long drive. Someone who just needed a place to sleep for the night. But when I think back on that shift now, the thing that makes my stomach twist isn't just the way he stared at me or the way he wandered through the building. It's the fact that he had been inside that hotel for hours and he was never supposed to be there in the first place. This happened about a year ago when I was working the overnight shift at a small roadside hotel. It wasn't a big chain or anything fancy, just a quiet 3-story building with about 40 rooms total. Most nights it felt almost abandoned. My shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Usually it was painfully quiet. On weeknights we might have 10 or 15 rooms occupied at most. Once midnight rolled around, almost everyone was already asleep in their rooms. The lobby would be silent, except for the hum of the vending machines and the occasional sound of a car passing on the road outside. Honestly, I didn't mind it. I'd sit behind the front desk doing paperwork, checking reservations, or watching random videos on my phone when things got really slow. The lobby itself was simple. The front desk faced the entrance doors, and off to the side there were 2 couches and a small television mounted on the wall. Near the back corner were a couple vending machines and a small hallway that led to the bathrooms. Behind the front desk was a small office space with a computer and a glass window that looked out toward the lobby, so I could still see everything while I worked. At night, the front doors automatically locked, so anyone coming in had to press a buzzer. I would press a button behind the desk to unlock the doors. Most of the time, it was just late guests returning from dinner or travelers arriving after a long drive. But one night, around 11 p.m., the buzzer went off and everything changed. I remember glancing at the monitor and seeing a man standing outside the glass doors. He looked normal enough, mid-40s maybe, tall, lean build, wearing jeans, a baseball cap, and carrying a backpack slung over one shoulder. Nothing about him seemed immediately strange. So I pressed the button and the door clicked open. He stepped inside and walked straight up to the desk. "Do you have any rooms available tonight?" he asked. His voice was calm, almost flat. "Yeah," I said. "We have a few open." I told him the price for a single room. He nodded without hesitation and pulled a credit card out of his wallet. I swiped the card through the machine and it beeped the way it normally does when a payment goes through. Everything looked routine. I handed him a key card for room 214 on the second floor. For a second, he just stood there looking at me. Not speaking, just staring. It wasn't aggressive or angry, but it lasted long enough that it made me uncomfortable. Maybe 3 or 4 seconds. Then he gave a small nod, picked up his backpack, and walked toward the elevator. I remember watching him disappear around the corner before going back to my computer. At the time, I just assumed he was another traveler passing through. Nothing more. For about an hour, everything stayed quiet. I scrolled through my phone, answered one late call from someone asking about room prices, and checked the camera monitors out of habit. Around midnight, I looked up and noticed something. The man had come back down. He wasn't at the desk or asking for anything. Instead, he had taken a seat on one of the couches in the lounge area. The TV in front of him was turned off, but he was sitting there facing it like he was watching something. At first, I didn't think much about it. Some guests come down to the lobby if they can't sleep. Sometimes they watch TV or grab snacks from the vending machines. But something about the way he sat there felt strange. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't reading. He wasn't even leaning back comfortably. He was sitting upright, hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead at a blank television screen. 30 minutes passed. He didn't move. At one point, I stood up to grab a bottle of water from the vending machine. As I walked across the lobby, I felt his eyes follow me. I didn't look directly at him, but you know that feeling when someone is staring at you? That heavy awareness on the back of your neck. I felt it the entire time. When I walked back behind the desk, the feeling faded. I glanced over. He was still sitting there facing the dark TV. Around 1 a.m., I got bored and started poking around in the reservation system on the computer. That's when something strange caught my attention. Room 214, the room I had just checked that man into, was listed as vacant. I frowned and refreshed the screen. Still vacant. I opened the check-in logs. Nothing. No record of his name. No room assignment. I felt confused. I knew I had just checked him in less than 2 hours earlier. Maybe the system hadn't saved the transaction properly, so I opened the payment records. Nothing there either. No charge. No card transaction. My stomach tightened a little. I knew for a fact I had swiped his card. The machine beeped like it had worked. But according to the system, the check-in had never happened. To double-check, I picked up the desk phone and dialed room 214. It rang. Once, twice, 10 times. No answer. I then opened the door access log, which records whenever a keycard unlocks a room door. Room 214 had no entries. Not a single one. That meant nobody had used the keycard to enter the room. I slowly turned my head toward the lounge area. The man was still sitting there, staring. That was the moment something inside me started to feel very wrong, because if he hadn't gone to the room, then why was he still here? I sat there watching him for another 15 minutes, trying to convince myself it was just some weird system glitch. Finally, around 1:30, I decided to walk over and talk to him. "Hey," I said, "everything okay with your room?" He slowly turned his head toward me. His face was completely blank. "I can't sleep," he said quietly. Then he turned back toward the TV. That was it. No explanation, no frustration about the room, just that one sentence. I nodded awkwardly and went back to the desk. But my hands were shaking a little now. Around 2 a.m., I noticed something that made my heart drop. The couch was empty. He wasn't there anymore. I quickly scanned the lobby. For a moment, I thought he had gone upstairs. Then I saw him, at the end of the hallway near the bathrooms, half hidden in the dim lighting, just standing there, completely still, watching the lobby, watching me. I looked down at the computer screen and pretended to type something. Every few seconds, I glanced up. He stayed there for several minutes before slowly walking back and sitting down in the lounge again, like nothing had happened. At that point, I called my manager at home. I explained everything that had happened so far. She sounded half asleep. "Just keep an eye on him," she said. "If he does anything threatening, call the police." After hanging up, I checked the security cameras. What I saw made things worse. On the hallway cameras, I could see him wandering around the first floor, walking slowly down corridors, stopping at the ends of hallways, standing there for long stretches of time. At one point, he entered the stairwell and stayed there for almost 10 minutes. I had no idea what he was doing. Every time I looked up from the monitors, he was somewhere else. Near the elevators, standing by the vending machines, lurking in dim corners where the light didn't reach very well. And almost every time, he was staring in my direction. By 3:30 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I called the non-emergency police line and explained that there was a man in the building who I didn't believe was a registered guest. They told me they'd send someone to check it out. While I waited, he moved closer to the desk. Now he was standing maybe 15 feet away, just watching me, not blinking much, not speaking, just staring. My chest felt tight. I pretended to type on the keyboard, but I could barely focus. Around 3:50, the buzzer went off at the front door. For a second, I thought the police had arrived already, but it was just another guest returning from outside. I let him in quickly. As the guest walked across the lobby, I noticed something disturbing. The man's head turned slowly. His eyes followed the guest the entire way across the room, studying him, like he was analyzing something. A few minutes later, the man disappeared again. I checked the cameras and saw him standing outside one of the guest rooms on the first floor. He wasn't knocking. He was just standing there in front of the door. That's when I stopped waiting. I called 911. I told the dispatcher there was a man inside the hotel acting suspiciously and lingering outside guest rooms. They said officers were on the way. I kept watching the camera feed. After about 3 minutes, the man slowly turned and walked back toward the lobby. When he entered the lobby again, he walked directly up to the desk. He leaned slightly over the counter. "Do you have any food here?" he asked softly. His voice was low and unsettling. "There are vending machines over there," I said, pointing. He smiled faintly. Then he walked away again. I stared at the clock, counting every second. Finally, around 4:10 a.m., the buzzer sounded again. 2 police officers were outside. I unlocked the door and immediately pointed toward the lounge area. He was sitting there again, like he had been all night. The officers approached him and spoke quietly for a few minutes. I couldn't hear what they were saying. They asked for his ID. Then they walked him outside. One of the officers came back a few minutes later. He explained that the man wasn't a guest at all. The credit card he had given me earlier was stolen. The system hadn't processed it because it had already been flagged, and the man had never actually completed a check-in. He had simply taken the key card and stayed inside the building. They charged him with trespassing and possession of stolen property. After the officers left, I sat behind the desk shaking until my shift ended. Even now, the part that still disturbs me the most is realizing how long he had been wandering around the hotel, standing outside guest rooms, watching people, watching me for hours, and he had never even been supposed to be inside that building at all. If that story gave you chills, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who loves creepy stories, and drop a comment telling me what you would have done in that situation. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next real horror story. The moment he said my name, I felt something inside my chest tighten. Not because it was loud or aggressive, but because he said it like he already knew me, like he'd been saying it to himself for a long time. That night started like every other quiet shift at the gas station. My name is Meredith. I was 24 at the time, and I worked the overnight shift at a tiny gas station off a rural highway called County Road 11. It was the kind of place most drivers didn't even notice unless they were desperate for gas or had been driving for hours and needed coffee. There were no restaurants nearby, no other stores, no houses for miles. Just the station, a small gravel lot, and a stretch of road disappearing into darkness on both sides. I had taken the job because I liked how predictable it was. Most nights were slow. Truck drivers stopping for fuel, maybe someone grabbing coffee or a candy bar. After midnight, things usually went completely quiet. The hum of the fluorescent lights and the distant sound of cars passing every now and then were usually the only noises keeping me company. That Thursday night had been especially quiet. It was around 1 a.m., and I was standing behind the counter staring at the microwave while a cinnamon roll slowly rotated inside. I wasn't even hungry, but the shift was dragging and I needed something to break the boredom. The microwave beeped. Right as I opened it, the front door chimed. I looked up automatically. A man had just walked in. He looked to be in his mid-40s, maybe older. His hair was messy and slightly gray around the edges. He wore a dark green jacket and jeans that looked worn from years of use. At first glance, he looked like any other late-night traveler, but something about the way he walked inside felt strange. Most customers head straight toward the coffee machines or the snack aisles. He didn't. He stopped near the counter and just stood there, watching me. "Hi," I said politely, forcing the usual customer service smile. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied my face for a moment. Then he said something that immediately made me uncomfortable. "You always work this late." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. I blinked, confused. Yeah, usually," I said. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something for him. "I figured," he said calmly. "I've passed through here a few times. Seems like you're always the one behind the counter." My stomach twisted slightly. I tried to brush it off. "Small town," I said awkwardly. He didn't laugh. He didn't smile. He just kept watching me. Then he said something that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Meredith, right?" I froze. I wasn't wearing a name tag. My hands stopped moving completely. I was about to ask how he knew my name when he spoke again. "You have nice handwriting," he said, casually nodding toward the whiteboard behind the counter. Earlier that evening, I had written a little message on it for customers. "Cinnamon coffee is back." "Most people dot their I's with little circles," he continued, "but you use slashes. It's very distinctive." My mouth suddenly felt dry. I hadn't even realized anyone paid attention to something like that. I didn't respond. The silence stretched between us. Finally, after another few seconds of uncomfortable staring, he gave a small nod. "I'm Paul," he said. Then he turned and walked out of the store, just like that. I stood there staring at the door long after it closed behind him. At the time, I told myself it was just a weird interaction. Some people are awkward. Some people notice strange details. It didn't mean anything. At least that's what I tried to believe. But then he came back. Not the next night, not even the night after that, but a few days later. The door chimed again around midnight, and there he was. Same green jacket, same calm expression. He walked in slowly and grabbed a bottle of water from the cooler. When he placed it on the counter, he looked directly at me. "You look tired tonight," he said. "Long shift," I replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. He nodded thoughtfully. Then he glanced around the store slowly, like he was taking inventory of everything inside. "You must get lonely out here," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," he said, gesturing toward the dark highway outside. "Just you in the middle of nowhere, no one around for miles." "I'm fine," I said quickly. He leaned slightly on the counter. "You ever get scared working alone at night?" The way he asked it wasn't threatening. If anything, his voice sounded curious, like he was genuinely interested in the answer. That somehow made it worse. I stepped back slightly. "Do you need anything else?" I asked. Instead of answering, he tilted his head slightly. "You keep the back room door locked," he said. My stomach dropped. "That's smart," he continued. "I've noticed you check it around 2 a.m. most nights." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I had never mentioned my routine to anyone, and there was no reason a random customer should know something like that. "I'll let you get back to work," he said softly. Then he grabbed the water bottle and walked out again. After that night, things changed. He didn't show up every shift. Sometimes a whole week would pass without seeing him, but eventually he would appear again. Sometimes he came inside the store. Sometimes he just sat in a car parked near the far end of the lot, headlights off, engine running, watching. The worst part was the unpredictability. I never knew when he might show up again. Every time the door chimed, my heart would jump. I started walking to my car with my keys between my fingers like claws. I kept a heavy tire iron under the counter just in case. I even started locking the bathroom door in my apartment when I showered. Little things that made me feel safer. But none of it stopped the feeling that someone was paying far too much attention to my life. Then one night, something happened that pushed things too far. I had stepped outside briefly to refill the windshield washer fluid bucket near the pumps. When I came back inside a few minutes later, something was sitting on the counter. A photograph, a Polaroid. I slowly picked it up. The image made my stomach flip. It was me, standing outside near the pumps, refilling the washer fluid bucket. The picture had been taken that same night, from close range, too close. There was no note attached, but someone had circled a word printed on the washer fluid bin in red ink. Windshield. The letter I had a small slash above it, exactly the way I wrote my own. A few nights later, Paul walked into the store again. That time, I didn't pretend everything was normal. "You need to leave," I told him immediately. He looked mildly surprised. "If you stay here, I'm calling the police," I added. He nodded slowly. "I understand," he said calmly. "You've been following me," I said, my voice shaking. "I wouldn't say that," he replied. "What would you call it then?" He thought for a moment. "Paying attention." "That's not attention," I said. "That's obsession." He didn't react. Instead, he asked something that made my skin crawl. "Would it feel more normal if I smiled more?" he asked. "Or bought a soda every night?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Would that make me less strange?" he continued quietly. "If I talked about sports like everyone else and pretended I didn't notice the details?" "What details?" I demanded. He shrugged slightly. "The way your shoes are always half a size too big," he said. My stomach twisted. "Or how your left eyelid twitches when you're tired." That was the moment I grabbed the phone and started dialing 911. He didn't try to stop me. He simply stood there with his hands resting calmly on the counter, waiting. The police arrived within minutes. They questioned him outside while I tried to calm down behind the counter. Eventually, one of the officers came back inside. They had searched his car. Inside, they found a notebook. Page after page filled with notes, dates, times, descriptions of what I wore during certain shifts, when I took breaks, when I walked outside to clean the pumps. One page had my name written over and over again until the letters blurred into scribbles. Paul kept telling the officers the same thing. "I just notice things," he said. "I'm a curious person." A restraining order was issued a few days later. Shortly after that, I transferred to a different gas station nearly 2 hours away. I also moved to a different apartment. Even now, years later, I still think about the way he said my name that first night, like he had practiced it, like he had already decided that it belonged to him somehow. And sometimes when I'm driving home late at night and I see headlights behind me for too long, I still feel that same cold tension creeping up the back of my neck. If that story made your night a little more unsettling, leave a like, share the video, and tell me in the comments what you think was really going on in that parking lot. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chilling story. The car had been sitting in the parking lot for almost an hour before anyone realized how strange it was. The weird part is, I never saw it myself. Other people kept telling me it was there. And the more they described it, the more it started to feel like something bad had almost happened that night. Something I might have walked straight into if a few other people hadn't shown up. At the time, I was 22 and working the overnight shift at a 24-hour gas station. I had only been there for about 2 months, so I was still getting used to the rhythm of the place. The store stayed open all night, but most of the traffic died down after midnight. The busiest hours were usually between 10 p.m. and midnight, when truck drivers or late travelers would stop in for snacks, gas, or coffee. After that, things got quiet. Sometimes really quiet. The station sat near the edge of a small town, just off a highway exit. At night, the parking lot looked huge and empty under the tall white lights. Beyond the pumps, there were fields and dark stretches of road with barely any houses nearby. Most overnight shifts were uneventful. I spent the time cleaning, restocking shelves, or mopping the floor while listening to music through one earbud. That particular night was a Thursday. My coworker Max had the weekday shifts while I worked Thursday through Saturday nights. Max was a pretty easygoing guy, and sometimes he'd stop by during my shift just to grab coffee and say hello. Around 2:30 a.m. that night, the door chimed and Max walked in with a friend of his. They were both laughing about something before they even reached the counter. Max introduced his friend as Ben. Both of them smelled strongly like cigar smoke, and it didn't take long before they admitted they had taken a few magic mushrooms earlier in the evening. They were in that goofy stage where everything seemed hilarious. Honestly, it made the shift a lot less boring. We stood there chatting for a while about random things. Max told a story about losing his car keys in a grocery store freezer earlier that week, and Ben couldn't stop laughing about it. Then Ben casually mentioned something that made me pause. "Hey," he said, "do you know whose car that is out there?" "What car?" I asked. "The one parked way over by the far corner." And he said, "The one with the lights off, but the engine running." I frowned. I didn't see a car. Ben looked surprised. "It's been sitting there since before we pulled in." Max nodded. "Yeah," he said. "There's a guy in it." That struck me as a little odd. Normally, I could see most of the parking lot from behind the counter, but there was one section near the far wall that was partially blocked by the building. If a car parked there, it wouldn't be visible from the register. "Maybe it's a DoorDash driver," I suggested. Food delivery drivers sometimes waited in the lot while orders were prepared. But then I remembered something. "I haven't gotten a DoorDash order in like 2 hours," I said. Max shrugged. "Maybe he's waiting for one." At the time, none of us thought too deeply about it. Max and Ben decided to step outside to smoke a cigar and play with Max's dog, who had been waiting in the truck. While they were outside, I went back to wiping down the coffee station and organizing the shelves. The station felt quiet again without them inside. About an hour passed before they came back through the door. Both of them looked a little more serious now. "Dude," Max said as he walked up to the counter. "That guy out there is acting weird." "What do you mean?" I asked. Max leaned against the counter. "He's been sitting in that car the entire time we were outside," he said. "Like, literally just sitting there watching us." Ben nodded. "And texting," he added. He kept looking down at his phone and then looking back up at us. That made me uncomfortable. "Did he say anything to you?" Ben chuckled awkwardly. "Well, I might have gone over there." "You what?" I asked. "I was curious," Ben said defensively. So I walked up and asked him why he was staring at us. "What did he say?" "At first he pretended he didn't speak English," Ben said. Max rolled his eyes. "Then suddenly he understood everything," he added. Ben continued the story. He said he was waiting for a DoorDash order, but when I told him the store hadn't had any orders in hours, he got weirdly nervous. What happened after that? I asked. He said maybe he had the wrong address, Ben said. Then he started his car and left really fast. Max nodded again. And the weirdest part, he said, there was another car parked down the road with its lights off. My stomach tightened. What? Yeah, Max said. As soon as that guy drove away, the other car pulled out and followed him. That immediately made the situation feel different, like maybe those two cars had been connected somehow. Max and Ben stayed inside the store for another 15 minutes before leaving. Before they walked out, Max paused at the door. Just keep an eye out tonight, he said. His tone was more serious now. Once they were gone, the quiet feeling inside the store returned. But now it felt heavier. Every time I walked past the front windows, I glanced toward the corner of the parking lot. Even though I couldn't see that spot from the counter, my mind kept imagining a car sitting there in the darkness, watching. Eventually, the shift continued normally. A few customers stopped by for coffee. A truck driver came in to buy snacks. Nothing unusual happened. By the time my shift ended around 6 a.m., I had almost convinced myself that the whole situation was just a strange coincidence. Later that morning, Max came back to the station. This time, he looked completely sober and much more serious. I was thinking about that car all night, he said. What about it? The guy was acting way too suspicious, he said. He explained that while they were outside earlier, the driver had constantly been switching between watching them and checking his phone. Almost like he was waiting for something, or someone. What kind of car was it? I asked. Max thought for a moment. Brand new looking, he said, like a Subaru or something. Then he added something that made my stomach drop. It didn't have license plates. No plates? I repeated. None, he said. And there were a bunch of blankets piled up in the back seat. Blankets, enough to hide someone under. Max shrugged. Maybe it was nothing, he said. But honestly, it gave me a really bad feeling. The more we talked about it, the more unsettling the situation became. If Max and Ben hadn't been outside for an hour that night, the parking lot would have been completely empty, and I would have been alone inside the store. If those two cars had actually been connected, if the drivers had been waiting for the right moment, I don't know what might have happened. A few nights later, something even stranger happened. During another late shift, a group of 4 guys came into the store around 3 a.m. While I was ringing up their coffee and snacks, one of them asked a question that made my heart sink. Hey, he said, do you know anything about the car sitting out there? My stomach tightened immediately. What car? I asked. The one parked way over there, he said. Lights off, but engine running. My chest felt cold. Can you describe it? I asked. Looks brand new, he said. Subaru maybe? No license plate. The same description, the same behavior. 2 nights in a row. And again, the car had parked in the exact blind spot where I couldn't see it from inside the store. The man continued explaining what they had seen. He said that while they were pumping gas, they noticed 2 men inside the car arguing. One of them had been pointing toward the entrance of the store, like they were discussing something about the building. When the group of customers walked past the car on their way inside, one of them tried to approach and ask if everything was okay. The moment the driver noticed them, the car immediately reversed and sped out of the parking lot. Gone within seconds. When I told them about the identical car from the previous night, the group exchanged uneasy looks. One of the men offered to stay in the store for a while, just in case the car came back. They hung around for about 20 minutes before finally leaving. Nothing else happened that night. But I kept thinking about the 2 cars Max had described. About the blankets in the back seat, about the way the drivers kept watching the store, and the fact that they had only left once other people were around. The scariest part of the whole situation is that I never actually saw the car myself. Every detail came from someone else. Which means if nobody had warned me about it, I might never have known how close something bad might have come to happening that night. Before we get into the final story, take a second to like the video and share it if you're enjoying these creepy stories so far. Also drop a comment and let me know which story has been the most disturbing for you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future horror uploads. The first time the bell rang, I assumed someone had walked in while I was in the back office. The second time it happened, I started to feel uneasy. But when I finally saw what was actually ringing the bell, I realized someone had been hiding just a few feet away from me the entire time. My name is Daniel, and at the time this happened, I was 29 years old, working the overnight shift at a small rural motel. It wasn't part of a chain or anything fancy, just a family-owned place sitting along a quiet highway outside of town. The kind of motel travelers stop at when they've been driving for hours and just need a cheap room and a few hours of sleep. The building only had about 25 rooms total, 2 floors, a small parking lot in front, and a tiny office that doubled as the front desk. My shift ran from 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. Most nights were unbelievably quiet, maybe 1 or 2 late check-ins if someone was passing through. But once midnight hit, the place usually went completely silent. That was one of the reasons I took the job. I'm not exactly a social person, and spending most of the night in a nearly empty building suited me just fine. The front office was small and simple. There was a desk facing the entrance doors, a few chairs for guests waiting to check in, a coffee machine sitting on a side table, and a rack full of local brochures and maps that nobody ever touched. Behind the desk was a short hallway leading to a back office. That room was basically my personal hangout during the shift. There was a couch, a small fridge, another desk with a computer, and a television mounted on the wall. The best part was the little speaker mounted above the doorway. Whenever someone pressed the service bell on the front desk, the speaker would make a loud ding back in the office. That meant I didn't have to sit at the desk all night waiting for someone to show up. Usually, I'd relax in the back office watching videos on my laptop or scrolling through my phone until the bell rang. Then, I'd walk up front and help whoever needed a room. Working there long enough, you start to recognize the normal sounds of the building. The heater clicking on and off, the creak of the wooden floors settling, the quiet buzz of the front door when a guest used their key card late at night. All of those sounds became familiar. But when you work alone overnight, even familiar sounds can start to feel unsettling if they happen at the wrong time. This happened on a Tuesday night in the fall. The weather had turned cold, and the parking lot outside was almost empty. Only 4 or 5 cars were parked in front of the rooms. By around 2 a.m., the road outside the motel was completely dark. No traffic, no headlights, nothing. I was in the back office lying on the couch, half watching something on my laptop, when I heard the bell. Ding. I got up immediately and walked to the front desk. But when I stepped into the office, the lobby was empty. No one standing at the counter, no one by the door. I looked outside through the glass entrance doors. The parking lot looked exactly the same as it had a few minutes earlier. All the same cars, all the same dark spaces between them. No headlights approaching, no one walking across the lot. For a moment, I wondered if I had imagined the sound, but the bell in the back office is loud and distinct. There was no way I could mistake it. I stood there for about a minute, waiting for someone to walk in. No one did. Eventually, I shrugged it off and went back to the office. Maybe someone had tapped the bell by accident and walked away. 10 minutes later, it happened again. Ding. This time, I got up faster. When I reached the desk, the lobby was still empty. That's when I started to feel a little uneasy. I checked the bathrooms. Nobody inside. I opened the front door and stepped outside. Cold air rushed in around me. The parking lot was silent. I walked a few steps onto the sidewalk and looked down the highway. Still nothing. No cars, no people. Just darkness. I went back inside and sat behind the front desk this time, instead of returning to the back office. Maybe someone was messing with me. Maybe a guest had a kid who thought ringing the bell and running away was funny. So, I decided to sit there and wait. The lights in the lobby were dimmed slightly, which made the shadows along the walls feel deeper than usual. The ticking of the wall clock suddenly sounded louder. Every little creak in the building made me glance toward the door. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Nothing happened. Eventually, my eyes started getting heavy. I leaned back in the chair and started thinking maybe I had just imagined the earlier bell rings. Maybe the speaker in the back office had glitched or something. I was just starting to relax when it happened again. Ding, ding. But this time, I saw it. Right in front of me. A pale hand slowly rose up from underneath the front desk. It reached over the counter and calmly pressed the bell. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then pure panic hit me all at once. I jumped up so fast, the chair slammed into the wall behind me. Without even thinking, I ran down the hallway toward the back office. I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. For several seconds, I just stood there in the dark, trying to understand what had just happened. Someone had been hiding under the desk. That meant they had been inside the office the entire time, probably listening to me moving around, waiting. I forced myself to look at the security monitors on the desk. There were 4 cameras connected to the system. One pointed at the lobby. One covered the hallway. 2 more showed the parking lot. On the lobby camera, I could see the chair I had knocked over lying on its side. For a moment, the counter area looked empty. Then something moved near the bottom corner of the screen. A head slowly rose up from behind the desk. The lighting made it hard to see details, but I could clearly make out the shape of someone crouching. And then I noticed something else. The person's face turned directly toward the camera. Even though the image was grainy, I could see the faint reflection of eyes staring straight into the lens. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped back from the monitor. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I dialed 911 and whispered to the dispatcher that someone had broken into the motel and was hiding inside the lobby. She told me to stay where I was and keep the door locked. While I stayed on the phone, I kept watching the monitor. The person disappeared from view for a moment. Then I saw them crawl out from behind the desk. They moved slowly across the floor on their hands and knees before standing up. The man was tall and thin, wearing a hoodie with the hood pulled tight around his face. He walked around the lobby like he was looking for something, opening drawers, checking behind furniture. At one point, he walked toward the entrance doors and stared outside for several seconds. Then he turned and started walking down the hallway toward the back office, toward me. I pressed my back against the locked door. A moment later, the doorknob rattled, just once, slowly. Then it stopped. My entire body felt frozen. The dispatcher kept asking if I was still safe. I could barely speak. After a few seconds, I heard footsteps moving away from the door. I rushed back to the monitor. The man was pacing around the lobby again. At one point, he casually flipped through the brochures on the rack like he was killing time. Minutes passed like that. Then finally, I saw flashing red and blue lights appear on the parking lot camera. 2 police cars pulled into the lot. The man must have seen them too. He suddenly ran out of frame. A moment later, I heard the front door open. The officers cleared the building quickly. When they came to the back office and knocked, I unlocked the door with shaking hands. They searched the motel for several minutes, but didn't find anyone. One officer later told me they found a large rock near the front entrance that had been used to prop the door open earlier. The man must have slipped out as soon as the police arrived. They checked the parking lot and nearby road, but whoever he was gone. I finished my shift that morning, but I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my head. The image of that pale hand slowly rising from beneath the desk, calmly pressing the bell, like he had all the time in the world. Now, every time I hear that bell ring during a night shift, my chest tightens a little, because I know that one night, someone was hiding under that desk, waiting. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these real horror stories, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling me which story disturbed you the most. And if you want more creepy stories like this, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss the next upload.